Hau, bonjour, ne magen tuk. Ni gan benesten digo. Vision do tem. Ma ni usmin kaning da ya. We say ma, gishoshkin mago. We oguchita, igwechmigo, we titajin the man. We manitu mazinagan. Quesago ma, gikagis taguzimin. We gisko, pogan, nitishie. Away the K, Kabi, Kinomaguan, Chimachtan, Chibatajin the man. Jinen Dagorapichi away when the Thomas and Agan. Is to go near, yeah, Nij, Senig, Ganani Mag, Wapskina was a basic. Kate Nag was a basic, me away. Me, yeah, Gikagis Magua, Chimamach dying. Ma Tiskai Yang, ma, being dig. When the 2 week yeah, me, yeah. Kabi Kinomaguan, Jab Jitoang, Wege Gokchi, Kakchin and Dagokti, Chindigatek, Mitishima, Mimanake, Bindigang Manongum. So bonjour, my English name is Don Jones. I'm from the Lynx clan and I am from Nigaguzmin Conning. So the building that you're seeing here is our traditional roundhouse. It was done by vision and following our vision. I just introduced myself in Anishinaabe one. I have an Anishinaabe name. I also said in my Anishinaabe language that tobacco is offered by Ogichita, Sonkamneginang, Grand Chief Kavanaugh, to talk about the treaty. And what I've been taught was that the treaty is very important. And so we had a pipe ceremony to acknowledge the treaty and to acknowledge our past ancestors that negotiated the treaty for us to be here today. So I'm asked to speak in English, although I'll be using some Anishinaabe words to describe the treaty. The first question I was asked to answer is, what is a treaty? And the treaty is a very sacred promise. As one grade 5 student told me one time, it's like a pinky swear. It's really a big promise. You can never go against it. And I found that very enlightening that a young person can say that. And so it's also a solemn exchange of promises between the chiefs and the treaty commissioners. What I'm going to be talking about is Manitou Mizinaigan, and it's the Anishinaabe understanding of Treaty Number 3. To further answer that question, it forms the boundaries of the relationship, and it also defines the understanding between our treaty partners. Next question that was asked is, why were treaties developed? Prior to our treaty, Anishinaabe people had a roaming way of life. They were nomadic. We had our own systems of governance. We had our own traditional practices. And we had cultural values to the land and the water. And we were taught by our elders to respect every living being. And so that's why the treaties were developed. What we call our ancestral lands is Gitikiminan. So we moved from place to place for subsistence harvesting, in search of food and shelter, depending on the time of year. Also, the Crown, which means the government, and the treaty commissioners, they had committed to build a national railway through our ancestral lands. And so the Anishinaabe people said that the use and benefits of the land would be shared between the settlers and us, and we can derive benefits from the Euro-Canadian presence. So in our trapping livelihood, for example, we would use the metal traps We also had access to guns for hunting. And then the most important part of the treaty, from our understanding, is to protect a way of life for future generations. So there are statements from treaty chiefs about why they signed the treaty. The next question is, how did the treaties come about? So for Treaty 3, the negotiations started in 1869. Formal negotiations for Treaty 3 started in 1871 and were concluded in 1873 after a long and serious diplomatic give and take. And so the understanding of the treaty can be shared with the elders, with spiritual leaders, and they did ceremonies for the spirit intent of the treaty. Pipe ceremonies were conducted, and I have photos of pipes that were used at the time of signing. And there's two individuals that have been given the responsibility to hang on to those pipes. So those pipes are still in existence today. They come to the Treaty 3 Chiefs meetings. They are lit and they are taken care of. So the treaty was negotiated by chiefs, and at that time they spoke in Anishinaabe to Canada's officials through interpreters. Canada's version of Treaty Number 3 versus the agreement known as Treaty Number 3 differs in many respects from the understanding of the chiefs. So the spirit and intent of the treaty was very highly regarded by our past leaders. An example would be that they wanted to share the lands and resources, whereas the Canada's version said that they gave up exclusive rights to land and water, which is not true. The intent is to share the resources. So there are other documents that are available that describe the terms of the treaty, and those documents are available through the Organization of Treaty and Aboriginal Rights at Grand Council Treaty Number 3. They also used a term in our language we call Ngwamaziwin, which is a consensual approach where everybody's consulted, everybody has to agree, and that's one of the reasons why I think the treaty took a long time to negotiate, because everybody had to be involved and everybody had to decide. And so there's a statement from the leader, Chief Powassan, that said, "We are all of one mind." And so they took time to discuss that and come to agreement to the terms of the treaty. So the other question I was asked to answer is treaty rights. What are they? So our ancestors wanted to keep a way of life together, so they negotiated fishing rights, hunting, trapping, the agricultural promise, mineral promise, forestry, also natural plants that we use for medicine. Education was very important for our leaders back then, and self-government. And we also had annuity payments, and we also had farming tools. I remember my father talking about an elder that he had understood that they were given an oxen and a plow, and they wanted to turn the Anishinaabe people into farmers so they can live off the land. So there are other rights that flow from court cases or some legislative amendments. One is that we enjoy a tax-free status, and young people have, even myself, have a status card, which we're exempt from a certain amount of tax when we buy goods from the store. We also, through court cases, the right to determine band membership, who belongs in the band, and for our elections, for voting for officer members. So those were done over time, over court cases. So the next question is, why do First Nations have different rights to fishing, hunting, harvesting, etc.? So our chiefs negotiated the treaty to ensure survival of future generations. And so when they have the 7 generations in mind, these fishing rights were central, and hunting rights, harvesting manomen, were essential to maintaining a way of life. But over time, governments have eroded or breached the treaty rights by creating different policies, different regulations. And so when that happened after treaty, First Nations were forced to use the courts to implement treaty rights, and we have won several cases. Currently, the chiefs do lobby governments to recognize treaty rights, especially Ontario and the federal government, and it resulted in the gradual easing of restrictions. So I remember as I was working in the organization, Treaty 3, I was nominated as a fishing negotiator, and over time the Ontario government eased the restrictions and replaced a position to the Ontario government which was respected. But more work needs to be done these days to have our rights recognized. We have different avenues that are being created, such as this video, to educate young people about the treaty rights. We also have organizations that are developing treaty curriculum, and we also need to continue consulting our elders about the terms of the treaty as they understand the treaty. So that is a quick overview of the treaty rights, to how Treaty 3 was formed, what the treaty rights are, and the work that has been done in the past. Aho, miigwech.